They left him for dead in the dirt with a bullet in his spine, but he didn't die. He clawed through rock and rot with broken fingers, and when he stood again, he wasn't the same man. This is what happened to him, and this is his story. If stories of betrayal, survival and justice speak to you, hit like and subscribe so more folks hear what really happened out west. The ink on the parchment was still wet when Cal Brennan slapped Elias Rigg on the shoulder. Dust motes danced in the last slanting light of the office window. Cal, at 42, felt the weight of years and hope in that gesture. Elias, 38, a little too handsome for his own good, just grinned and poured them another whiskey. They'd done it. The land claim was theirs, a vast stretch of good grazing land, and the cattle deal that came with it. Cal had sold off every piece of family silver, things his mother had polished for decades to make it happen. He didn't even tell his sister. He just hoped she'd understand later. Elias had been celebrating more than working lately. Cal noticed. His flask was always a little too full, and he'd been spending too much time at the general store, not buying supplies but talking to Cal's sister Sarah. She was a pretty thing, and Elias had a way about him, all charm and easy laughter, but it still felt wrong. Cal tried not to think about it. Their ranch, what they called the Double Bar, was just a few ramshackle corrals and a half-finished bunkhouse now, but it was theirs. A big season lay ahead, Elias kept saying. A very big season. Cal nodded, sipping his drink. The future shimmered like a heat haze on the horizon, promising so much. He missed the silver, though. He really did. The sun beat down, hard and relentless, on the winding trail through Coyote Gulch. Cal rode ahead, his horse picking its way through the loose rock. The saddlebags behind him held the payroll, heavy with silver coin and paper notes, enough to pay off the hands and buy more feed. Elias was supposed to be right behind him, singing some off-key tune like he always did when they were out in the hills. But today, there was only silence. Cal heard the crack first, sharp and sudden like a dry branch snapping, then a searing hot iron slammed into his back, just below the shoulder blade. His body went rigid, then sagged. His hands lost their grip on the reins, and he tumbled from the saddle, hitting the dust hard. The breath left him in a ragged gasp. He tried to move, but his legs, his whole lower half, felt like wet sacks. Nothing worked. He rolled his head, just enough to see Elias dismounting, the smoking pistol still in his hand. Elias looked down, his face flat, like he was checking fence posts. He knelt, took the heavy saddlebags, then pulled Cal's own flask from his coat pocket. He even took his spurs. Elias stood, then bent again, grabbing Cal by the boots. He dragged him over to a shallow dip, near a scraggly mesquite. He started kicking dirt over him, humming a tuneless little song as the dust settled. Cal's vision blurred. The humming faded. He couldn't move, but his fingers, buried in the loose earth, still twitched. Just barely. Darkness pressed down, heavy and thick, smelling of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sharp. Cal was half buried, the dirt cool against his face, stifling his every breath. He tried to cough, but only a weak rattling sound escaped, swallowed by the soil. He blinked, fighting against the blackness that kept trying to pull him under. He remembered a story his father told him, about a man buried alive during a cave-in. A flicker. He was a boy again, small, his hands scraped raw, digging a rabbit burrow in the creek bank. His father had taught him how to dig, slow and steady, how to find the weak spots in the earth. Later, he learned to set traps, to wait, to be patient. The memory brought a jolt, a strange burning urge to move. The pain in his spine was a blinding, white-hot line, a cruel joke. He couldn't feel his legs, couldn't move them, but his right arm, the one he'd landed on, was free, just barely. He pushed. Small stones rained down on his face. He pushed again. An inch. A raw, guttural moan ripped from his throat. He clawed at the dirt, one agonizing hand at a time, pulling himself through the cold earth. Black spots danced before his eyes, and he lost moments, chunks of time where he ceased to exist. Then, with a desperate, ragged gasp, his head broke the surface. Night air, cool and sharp, filled his lungs. He lay there, his body shuddering, gasping like a newborn. The moon was a sliver, thin and cold, when Cal finally clawed his way free of the earth. His fingers were raw, nails broken, smeared with mud. The air, when he could suck it in, felt like grit and sand. He found a broken branch, thick and gnarled, and dragged himself upright, leaning heavily on it. His legs were still dead weights, useless. He started to crawl, pulling himself forward, one arm over the other, dragging his lower body behind him like a broken sled. The sun rose, baking his exposed skin. The heat pressed in. Buzzards, like dark stains against the bright sky, began to circle. High above, they seemed to follow him. He crawled through dry creek beds, over rocks that scraped his skin, through thorny brush that tore at his clothes. 2 days blurred into a single, agonizing smear of pain and thirst. His tongue felt like sandpaper, stuck to the roof of his mouth. He thought about water, about the old watering hole they used to visit. Maybe a day's crawl, maybe more. He just kept moving. He saw the dust cloud first, then the horse, a rider, small and still, against the vast empty sky. A Navajo woman, her face shadowed beneath the brim of her hat. She reined in her horse, looking down at him, her expression unreadable. He tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. She dismounted, her movements fluid and silent. Without a word, she bent, a flicker of dark eyes meeting his, and with surprising strength lifted his broken body into her saddle. He woke to the smell of wood smoke and unfamiliar herbs. The light was dim, filtering through a small opening in a ceiling made of branches and mud. He was lying on a pallet of dried grasses, wrapped tightly in something coarse, like a blanket woven from cactus fiber. His throat burned. He tried to move his legs, but they were still heavy, unresponsive. A woman sat by a small crackling fire, grinding something with a stone pestle. She was Toya. He knew, though he couldn't remember her saying the name. She looked up, her dark eyes steady. She brought him a shallow bowl of thin broth, warm and earthy. He drank it slowly, feeling life seep back into his parched body. She treated his wound, pressing cool poultices to his back. The bullet, she indicated with a gesture, was still there, too close to the spine. For weeks he lay there, immobile, the pain a constant dull throb that became part of him, like the rhythm of his own breathing. He watched her move about the hut, quiet and efficient. One night, by the low firelight, he found his voice. He whispered his story, words tasting like ash in his mouth. He told her about Elias, about the partnership, the shot, the grave. She listened, her face impassive, occasionally nodding. She didn't speak much English, but she understood. When he finished, the hut was silent, save for the crackling fire. "I will return," he rasped, the vow hanging heavy in the still air, "for what was mine." Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Cal learned to sit up, then stand, leaning against the hut wall, his back stiff as a board. Toya brought him a gnarled piece of wood, white and bleached from the desert sun. Horsebone, he realized. With quiet patience she helped him carve it, sanding it smooth until it became a walking stick, perfectly suited to his grip, a grim extension of his will. He walked, slowly at first, then with a steady, if slightly off-kilter rhythm. The limp would stay, a permanent reminder. The morning he left, the desert air was cool. He had nothing but the horsebone stick, the old poncho Toya had given him, and the burning core of his resolve. He didn't go west, back to the double bar, back to what was no longer his. That place was tainted. He turned east, toward the rising sun, toward towns, toward people. He had to learn things, gather resources, become something he wasn't before. He thought of Elias, living on his land, probably laughing, telling stories of a poor dead partner. The thought was a cold ember in his gut. He thought of the taste of dirt, the press of earth. He thought of Toya's quiet strength. He walked, one foot in front of the other. Not Cal Brennan, the rancher, not anymore. Just a man walking, becoming something else entirely, step by silent step. 9 months melted away, swallowed by the heat of a blacksmith's forge in a Kansas town. Cal, now calling himself Caleb, poured his quiet fury into the shaping of metal. The work was brutal, unforgiving, lifting the heavy hammers, turning the glowing iron. It was a daily torment, a constant reminder of the weakness in his back. But he found a way. He learned to brace his bad leg, to use his good arm like a piston, to let the fire and the iron rebuild what had been broken. His hands, once soft from paperwork, hardened into calloused claws. He learned to forge and temper, to coax strength from raw material. He watched the old smith, a silent man with forearms like tree trunks, and absorbed everything. He picked up a new skill every week, gunsmithing, learning the intricate workings of a pistol, how to make it sing or snarl. He studied old books on poisons, learning about plants and powders that could kill slowly, subtly. He even spent time with the farrier, understanding horses, their habits, their weaknesses. In the small hours of the night, by the light of a sputtering oil lamp, he would open a worn leather book. Inside he kept a list, carefully penned, names, places, the debts that were owed to him. Elias Rigg, the double bar. Every hammer blow, every hiss of steel plunged into water was for that list. This wasn't just work. It was the slow, deliberate forging of a weapon, himself included. News travelled slow across the plains, carried by wagoneers and occasional riders. But it always arrived. Cal heard about Elias. The ranch, now expanded, boasted a new, grander bunkhouse. Elias had named it Rig Ridge, a brazen claim, and the worst of it, Elias had married Sarah, Cal's old sweetheart, his own sister. The betrayal felt like another bullet, this one clean through the heart. Elias was respected in town, the stories went, a self-made man. He told everyone how Cal had died in a tragic accident up in the hills, a riding mishap. The lias tasted like ash in Cal's mouth. He bought a horse, a sturdy bay with a good stride, and rode west. He didn't head for town, not yet. He wasn't ready to be seen, not by anyone who might recognize the ghost. Instead, he found a secluded camp near the ridge, hidden by a cluster of cottonwoods beside a dried-up creek bed. He set up a lean-to, camouflaged with brush, and settled in. From his vantage point, he watched. He watched the new bunkhouse, the expanded corrals. He watched Elias ride out, a prosperous man now, surrounded by hands. He learned their routines, their comings and goings, the rhythm of a life that should have been his. The smoke from Elias's chimneys drifted on the wind, carrying the scent of a false victory. Cal watched and learned, and the cold ember in his gut began to burn brighter. A limping trader, wrapped in a faded dust coat, appeared in town. He sold tools, good, solid ironwork, from the back of a wagon. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, and he moved with a slight stiffness in his left leg. Locals looked at him with a wrinkle of the brow. "That man looks familiar," they whispered, but couldn't quite place him. Cal visited the blacksmith, praising his forge, subtly asking about the big rancher, Elias Rigg. He bought flour from the grocer, listening to the gossip about the upcoming mayoral elections. He even managed a quiet word with Sheriff Brody, an old acquaintance, casually asking about the accident that had claimed his former partner, Cal Brennan. Brody fidgeted, spoke of a flash flood, a body never found. Cal just nodded, his eyes seeing everything, missing nothing. He learned Elias was pushing his workers hard, cutting corners on wages, and planning to run for mayor. The man was building an empire on a lie. That night, under the cover of darkness, Cal rode to the edge of Elias's property. He slipped off his horse, walked up to the grand new gate, the one that should have been his. He left a single polished bullet on the top rail, a silent promise, and beneath it a small note, carefully folded. Not yet. He rode away, leaving the bullet glimmering under the faint moonlight, a whisper of a ghost in the wind. The drought tightened its grip on the land, and the cattle at Rigg Ridge grew restless, lowing for water. Elias had just finished building a new water tower at Grady's well, piping water from the deeper springs. He was proud of it. Cal waited until the moon was dark. He slipped through the night, a silent shadow among the dry brush, moving with the practiced ease of someone who knew the land and the way its pipes connected. A few calculated cuts, a well-placed charge, and the wooden structure shuddered, then groaned. A cascade of water exploded, carving a new gully in the parched earth, spilling uselessly into the sand. Panic rippled through Rigg Ridge. Elias, his face red with fury, immediately hired a small crew of gunmen, drifters from the next territory, to find the vandal. Cal watched them from the high ground. He picked them off one by one, silently, methodically. A rifle shot from a hidden copse, a sudden knife in the dark as one ventured too close to a shadowed spring. No grand showdowns, just quiet disappearances. He left messages, carved into the rough bark of a cottonwood tree near the fallen water tower, then into a fence post where one of the gunmen fell. Simple words, rough cut but clear. "You buried me once." The messages served two purposes, to warn Elias and to haunt him. The ranch was silent now, save for the wind. The remaining cattle bawled. Sarah, Elias's new wife, moved through the grand, unfamiliar rooms of the ranch house. She had tried to make it a home, but a coldness had settled over Elias since the water tower incident. One afternoon, clearing out an old saddlebag that Elias rarely used, she found it. A small, worn Bible, its cover cracked, and tucked inside, a single loose page, brittle with age. Her breath hitched. It was a page from Cal's old Bible, the one he carried everywhere, and the handwriting, faint but familiar, scratched in the margin. "Be steadfast in truth, for lies will bury you." She recognized it. It was Cal's hand. He used to scribble verses and thoughts in that Bible. Her mind reeled. Elias had said Cal was gone, washed away in a flood. But this? A cold dread began to curl in her stomach. Whispers had started in town, too. Farmers talking about the accidents at the ranch, the gunmen Elias had hired, how quickly they vanished. Folks were starting to question Elias, his sudden wealth, his shift from a cheerful partner to a grim, driven man. One evening, a small, unmarked letter appeared, tucked under her door. No name, no address. Just a few lines, concise and sharp. It spoke of betrayal, of a man shot in the back, of a shallow grave. It didn't mention names, but the details were too specific, too vivid. Sarah held the letter, her hand trembling. The ghost of Cal Brennan, it seemed, had begun to speak, reaching out from the silent hills. She knew, with a terrible certainty, that the man she had married was a liar. Sheriff Brody, a burly man with kind eyes and a slow, deliberate manner, stood in the center of Elias Riggs' polished office. Dust motes danced in the light, but the air was thick with unspoken tension. Brody had known Cal for years, and Elias too. The rumors had been building, the strange incidents, the vanished gunman, Sarah's quiet distress. "Elias," the sheriff began, his voice low, "folks are talking about inconsistencies, about Cal Brennan, that flood story. It never sat right with me." Elias, seated behind his desk, gripped the arms of his chair. His face, usually jovial, was drawn and tight. "What are you implying, Sheriff?" he snapped, his voice sharp as a broken glass. "My partner died. It was a tragedy." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. "You're overstepping, Brody. I'm running for mayor. This is harassment." The sheriff held his gaze. "Justice tends to find its way, Elias, no matter how many fences you build around it." Elias's eyes narrowed. He lunged for a pistol holstered on a wall rack, snatched it, and fired a shot into the ceiling. The crack echoed, shaking the dust. "Get out!" Elias roared, his face contorted. Brody just stared at him, his face hardening. He turned and walked out, his steps slow and heavy. The law has just shifted. Cal, watching from the alleyway across the street, saw Brody emerge, his jaw set. He saw the cracks in Elias's fortress widen. Elias Rigg, his face pale and eyes wild, had barricaded himself inside the ranch house. Gunmen, what few he could still trust, paced the perimeter, jumpy and uncertain. He knew it was coming. The whispers, the missing men, Sarah's cold silence, it had all tightened around him like a noose. He clutched a rifle, peering through a slit in the curtains, his breath ragged. Cal arrived in the dead of night, a single limping figure moving through the moonless dark. He didn't come in a rush, no charging heroics, just a steady, deliberate walk into the fortified ranch. A shot rang out from the bunkhouse. Cal kept walking. Another shot, from the main house. The bullet hit him square in the chest, a dull thud. But he just stumbled, then regained his stride. Beneath his dust coat, a steel plate, forged in a Kansas blacksmith shop, had saved him. He walked into the corral, illuminated by a single flickering lantern. Elias was there, gun shaking in his hands. This wasn't a fast-draw duel, it was a slow, brutal standoff, the air thick with the weight of years. Elias fired again and again, but Cal kept coming, a ghost made of iron and will. He knocked the gun from Elias's hand, then dragged him, struggling and whimpering, out of the corral, past the bunkhouse, and out toward the dark, desolate hills. He stopped at a familiar dip in the earth, marked by a scraggly mesquite. "Start digging, Elias." Cal's voice was low, flat. This time, dig deeper. The sheriff arrived at dawn, finding Elias Rigg, disheveled and broken, scooping dirt with his bare hands in a shallow, freshly dug pit. Elias was arrested without a struggle, his will shattered. The town, once divided in its whispers, now turned against him completely. His trial was swift, his lies undone by Sarah's testimony and the silent evidence of the grave, just barely begun. Elias was sent to prison, his name a stain on the land. Cal didn't stay to see the ranch restored. He didn't reclaim his deed, his name cleared, his property returned. He had lived once for a ranch, for a dream built on dust and ambition. That dream had died with the bullet in his back. He rode east, not to Kansas but further, into the quiet sun-baked lands. He found Toya's hut again, small and unassuming under the vast sky. He gave her half the deed to what would have been his land, a silent gesture of gratitude and shared survival. She took it without a word, her eyes deep and knowing. Before he left the territory for good, he stopped by the sheriff's office. He left a simple, unsealed letter on Brody's desk. It contained only a few lines, carefully written, "I lived once for a ranch. I live now for peace." The town quietly honored him, the man who came back. They built a small, humble monument near the spring he had crawled to, but Cal never attended. He just kept moving, chasing a different kind of horizon. 5 years stretched out, marked by the changing seasons, by quiet mornings and long, dusty afternoons. Cal Brennan, still walking with that slight, distinctive limp, lived in a small, weathered cabin on the very edge of a new, growing town, far from the old territory. He spent his days mending tack, sharpening blades for the local farmers, and teaching the neighborhood boys how to shoot straight and mend a broken fence. His hands were still strong, calloused from work, but his eyes held a quiet peace, a stillness that hadn't been there before. One autumn afternoon, a wagon pulled up to his cabin. Toya emerged, her face lined but her eyes as sharp as ever. With her was a small boy, no older than 5, his hair as black as a raven's wing. He was her grandson. The boy looked up at Cal, his eyes wide. "Uncle Dirt," he piped, a nickname Cal had earned in the old days, when he was just a ghost crawling through the dust. Cal smiled, a rare, genuine curve of his lips. Later, as the sun dipped low, a younger ranch hand from town, one of the boys Cal had taught to shoot, approached him cautiously. "Mr. Brennan," he started, shifting his weight. "Is it true what they say, that you came back from the grave?" Cal looked out at the fading light, the distant hills turning purple. He turned back, his gaze steady, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. "I never left," he said, his voice soft, a little rough, like stones tumbled in a river. "Just needed to stand again.